Okie dokie. This is going to be a deck tech for my primer here. This is my current build, card for card. Feels fairly strong. I have the cards listed in terms of what their use is, and I put what I consider the weakest of the pair at the top, and then the strongest cards at the bottom, or most important to the build. So actually, if I'm doing that, I think Pact is actually stronger than Tormod's Crypt. So maybe I can start doing that to like over here, or right down here. But either way, this is what the core build looks like. I'm going to go through it by converted mana cost, and then I'm going to tell you exactly how each phase of the game is supposed to look. We're going to start off here at our 0 drops. We have 2 control slots for 0 here on the top, and this one down here that we're going to count as a 0 drop in Force of Will. So I kind of put them in their own little pile down here because their mana cost is actually higher, so it will hit harder with Ad Nauseam or a Dark Confidant trigger. But we have 3 control cards at 0, which is fairly good. I used to play Misdirection, but the problem with Misdirection is it's not quite as good as Force of Will. And because it's limited, it's weaker than some of these converted one-drop counter spells. So we know free is better. Taking 4 more off Ad Nauseam is bad. Pitching isn't something we always want to do. Exiling cards is very important in this deck. As to which ones you pick, there are lots of different ways to win with this deck. So it's not like any card is unexilable to a Force of Will. But Misdirection, though it still functioned fairly well at winning counterspell wars and things like that, just didn't bring to the table the same thing something like a Swan Song does. And keeping 1 mana open is not very difficult. Force of Will is an exception because its quality is so high. You can hit anything with this spell. I don't think I need to describe anything else. Tormod's Crypt is a very good card. Mainly because, and if you're playing in a competitive metagame, most competitive decks will use the graveyard one way or the other. The very top tier decks, like Hermit Druid, if you play a Tormod's Crypt against a Hermit Druid player, they will typically have to go tutor their Nature's Claim or something like that to get rid of it. Or if they have an Entomb, maybe they go get Ancient Grudge, something like that. But it makes them waste some of their gas, and they actually have to have something in hand to go find it or an answer in hand, or they simply cannot go off. In a mirror match, you shut down Yawgmoth's Will and Past in Flames, as well as if they play things like Snapcaster Mage, which are very common. Against Reanimator, obviously very, very strong. Because it costs 0, it doesn't hit for any damage off Ad Nauseam, and it builds Storm. So 0 drops are almost always good after Ad Nauseam, but you don't really want to play a card in the 0 drop slot that doesn't have use in other spots in the game. But just having a card that costs 0 that you can play for free and up your Storm, you can just say that's a free random card off of Mind's Desire, and a couple extra tendrils damage, or, you know, it's doing something when you're playing a Tormod's Crypt. I mean, you end up bouncing it with something like this Chain of Vapor, when you're sacking all your lands just to build Storm to finish someone off. Another card that I'm going to talk about that's not in the build right now, that's one of the cards I've been testing, is Hurkyl's Recall, which is very good with cards like this. Very, very strong control card. I don't play very many control slots total in this deck, so everyone I play I feel is very strong, and Tormod's Crypt is just a very good card. Pact of Negation also hits for 0 off Ad Nauseam. You can use it on combo turn for free. It's almost the best protection spell in any Doomsday pile. It's good on the turn you're going off. It's not that great in your opening hand, because you won't be able to use it in the first couple turns of the game. So it's not the most powerful setup card ever, and we do quite frequently wheel out our cards. So it's not necessarily the best card to see in your opening hand, but almost at any other phase in the game, we don't mind seeing it. So, great card. Everflowing Chalice is pretty much played just because it's 0. Similar to Tormod's Crypt, I can just play it for free, and oftentimes after Ad Nauseam, if you hit an Everflowing Chalice, you will not be playing it for any mana whatsoever. You'll just be casting as a free Storm. It's nice that it doesn't ping you when you hit it, since it's not really doing anything to get you there, which is something I think a lot of people don't think about. Is with Ad Nauseam, your proportions are very important, because assuming your cards are, efficient for their mana cost. As long as your proportions are enough to go off, and they're, you know, a direct relationship to your life total, it should be fairly easy to win. Like, you want to maximize 0 drops, because if you're tapped out, you know, you're going to have something to start your chain. But when you have lots of gas cards, lots of ways to find cards, I mean, the way a storm deck goes off, you actually want these cards to go find other cards instead of just always having the perfect card, because it builds storm while you're finding all the stuff you want to make all the mana and continue your chain. It works just like a machine, kind of how like you'd normally play, where you're constantly trying to put cards in and out of your hand. That's what this deck does, just to go off. It plays cards that say, if you're doing that to a extreme level, this card just wins. So 0 drops are very, very good. Mox Opal I put above Chrome Mox, Lotus Petal, Mox Diamond, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mana Crypt. It's near the top. Slightly better than Everflowing Chalice, because you can play it for 0 and it can net mana. However, in an opening hand, it's not bad value just to play it and then wheel it away. You can always play it for free, even if it doesn't do anything, but because it could potentially just be a dead card for the first couple turns, it's not the strongest. Our artifact count isn't so high that this should just always be online. After Ad Nauseam, yes. After a few turns, and we've wheeled a couple times, hopefully, you know. But right away, it's not the greatest. Chrome Mox is an incredible card. I'll start pulling these up because it doesn't do the big picture when I mouse over like it did in the good old version that I wasn't forced to use, god damn it. But let's say I'm not super pissed about that, but I am. Chrome Mox is very good because often in this deck you'll have a card in your hand that is dead in your opening hand. Like I just said, there's very, very often cards you just don't need at a certain phase of the game. For example, I'm going to talk about the card Dark Confidant at the same time. I think it's a perfect time to talk about a card like Dark Confidant, because these cards have amazing synergy, first of all. One of my favorite things about this card is the ability to play it turn 1. Things like Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond. I will even bend a Lotus Petal to a Dark Confidant if I have a land light hand, and it's perfectly fine trade, because meeting that land drop makes up for that Lotus Petal and continues, and it also builds up towards my High Tide chain, and it just gets me further into the deck. I see him very much as deck thinning. Not as exciting as he is in Modern and stuff, but he's very, very strong. Not only can you play him turn 1, he's good in any opening hand situation, pretty much, period. But not only that, if you get him later in the game, off your Ad Nauseam chain, this is the perfect example of a card that's very, very good early, but in a deck where you're easily able to pitch cards away you do not need. Later in the game, maybe this is what I exile to my Chrome Mox for my free mana, because it has almost no use to me while I'm trying to go off. Where did that go? Probably about there. Nice Whisper is slightly better. But Chrome Mox, because of this, is pretty much almost like playing Power. Because if you know you're going to probably have a card in your hand you don't need, you don't mind pitch. It's almost like, say you mold a 6, but your mold of 6s, you keep the best 6 cards in your hand, the best 5 cards in your hand, excluding this as a card, and then you just get a Mox of a power choice in your opening hand. Power is power for a reason. Dumping a card to cheat a turn ahead, be able to play thing for 0, sets up some of the most broken plays this entire deck can make. The entire game is about mana. If you don't have mana, it's very hard to do stuff. There are a few exceptions to this rule, obviously, but Chrome Mox is the kind of card that can set up insane opening turns. When you combo this with one of these broken double mana sources, like a Soul Ring or a Mana Vault, or say you get, you know, a Mox Diamond, these like super, super fast, you can dump them right away ramp spells, lead you to just taking over the game with any kind of massive draw spell. That's really the key of this deck, how I have it built. You're banking on playing 1 or 2 of these ramp spells very quickly and then getting into a wheel. Let's say you only get 1. Because we're so land light, we could easily miss land drops. We could easily see a hand with this, only 2 lands, and then by our second turn we could wheel out and just pitch a bunch of cards we don't even need. We could just hit all crap that we don't want at that time, and we are absolutely fine making that play. We've ramped 1, We've got our land drops out, and now we have another hand full of cards light on lands with very good odds of being able to hit and continue the chain. We want all of our cards, when we draw a 7, to have a proportion so that you can keep going. You don't want to have all mana, and the reason you don't have all mana because you can easily just completely whiff. One of the best things about playing Damia was that I could overload the mana, because I knew that if I drew nothing but mana, I could easily just go into my commander instantly, and then if they killed it, you just play it again, and no matter what, you're either going to draw the gas off the top, or you draw more mana and you just continuously drop her, so it gives you some inevitability. But this is much better in that you will always be able to find this broken ramp, this same stupid ramp, over and over again, because you're always going to have a tutor or large draw spell or a cantrip that's very good at finding them. There's just a lot of things that let you continue to play all your cards, chain them back and forth, to the point where by the time you get to turn 4 in this deck, you can expect to cast a good 1/4 of your deck in the single turn. And these cards here are the most important cards for being able to do that. These cards that are free, that produce mana for nothing. Their efficiency is incredible. Mox Diamond's slightly better because all you have to do is bin a land. Even though we're land light, it taps for every color. Post ad nauseam, almost strictly better because we're not going to be losing a card we care about. And it can tap for different colors. At times you'll be turnaboutting your artifacts. For example, if you sack your lands to a Chain of Vapor or something like this. So very important. Pretty good in opening hands as long as you get 3 mana sources, because then you can always wheel or tutor into a wheel. The first couple turns is typically what we do. We just want to refill our hand in any way possible. If we get lucky and draw something like an ad nauseam, then that's fine. If we draw any of these other 5 drops, we'll ramp into them, that's fine, and then we can make our play from there, seeing what we pull off the top. But these are the cards we want to see in almost every opening hand, and all of them have synergy with these cheap draw spells, or these powerful, obscenely broken draw spells. Lion's Eye Diamond. Lion's Eye Diamond is stupid with Yawgmoth's Will. The big problem with Lion's Eye Diamond, whether you're using it in Doomsday, whether you're using it in response to your ad nauseam to get a better chance to hit, whether you're using it as you're wheeling just to get better odds to continue a chain, you're going to lose your hand. This is a big issue because even if all your opponents are tapped out in a more competitive metagame, you risk getting Force of Will on that massive draw spell. And this puts you in a position where you're pretty much screwed. This is one of the situations where having this person right here as our commander is actually very good. If that happened to you, or something similar to that happened to you, or you whiff for any reason, your general will give you better odds of being able to get back going, because you're really only going to have maybe a 1-turn window to come back into the game. You're either going to get hated out or someone else is going to go off. This is about as good as we can do in these colors. Anything else really it just doesn't do that, and that's really the only effect we're looking for out of the command zone. I mean, anything else is just kind of 1 in 100 games that will be relevant. This can be relevant much more often than that. For reasons like this. But the reason this card is so good is, I mean, it's a Black Lotus. I mean, it's almost, it's not better than a Black Lotus, but it's almost the same as a Black Lotus when you're chaining things with Yawgmoth's Will. It's 2 activations of free 3 mana. That's insane. It gets you going off the ground. It makes it so you can play all your spells, tap out to your Yawgmoth's Will when you're sure your opponents are dumped out, or you've got one of these cards sitting in your graveyard as well. Then you're still vulnerable with the Yawgmoth's Will on the stack. That's one of the things that's the weakest points in this deck. If you're trying to beat a deck like this, if you can hit the Yawgmoth's Will when it's on the stack, it's very, very strong. Without the Yawgmoth's Will, we won't be bringing this kind of card back. It's one of the reasons this card is strictly better than Past Inflames. Well, not strictly better, because you can cast it from your graveyard. Damn it. Well, in my eyes, this is pretty much the most broken card in the deck. The better your deck is, the better Yawg Moth's Will is. The faster your deck is, the better Yawg Moth's Will is. The more ritual effects you have, the better Yawg Moth's Will is. The cheaper your curve, the better Yawg Moth's Will is. So everything this deck is, Yawg Moth's Will just loves, including Lion's Eye Diamond. Mana Crypt is slightly better because it's free 2 mana. There's almost nothing better than Mana Crypt you can play in almost any deck. Being able to tap for 2 free mana every turn is absurd. If you can luckily curve it out into one of these 3-drops, or these colorless 2-drops, you know, or save or play a 1-drop plus a 2-drop, or, you know, a 2-drop into another 1-drop over here. Like, if you curve out with this card, you're going to be going off turn 3. I mean, it'll spike your win turn a full turn just by opening this in your starting hand, which is really insane. That's why it's better. Mana Crypt hands can go off turn 3 all day. You just can go straight into the Ad Nauseam. A lot of times, like, if you have think about it, you have a ramp behind it, okay, just 1 ramp spell, and now you've ramped 3. You can tutor your Ad Nauseam and then just cast it and win, and that's it. Game over. I mean, a perfect hand would be like this, mana to cast it, free counter spells. I mean, that's just win. That's why a lot of people call it the Ad Nauseam deck, because this is one of the strongest cards in the deck. It's not the only card in the deck, it's not the only way to go off, but there is a lot of focus on it because it is in fact so strong. And because most combo decks in this format are based around casting these, there is a much higher percentage chance that this is the best card for you to grab than almost any other card in the deck with your first tutor. I will say that with your first tutor, maybe over half the time you'll be getting other cards, but the other half the time you just get this card, which is why the deck is called Ad Nauseam most of the time. Gush is an interesting card. Gush is a card that's very strong with Doomsday. One of the main reasons I play the Gush is because it makes some very efficient, very powerful Doomsday piles, and my Doomsday package almost feels like it's just these 3 cards right here, which is very tight for a package. You don't even have to play the Gush, but the Gush is just pretty strong on its own. First of all, one of the major weaknesses with playing a light land base like this is strip mine effects, Armageddon effects. It's hard to hit more lands, especially if we're blocked of colored mana. Gush can protect our lands from these destruction spells at the extreme cost of drawing me 2 cards, so that seems fairly good. When you are going off, it's not great to hit Gush at 5 for Ad Nauseam, but at the same time, having a free draws 2 when you're hitting these tutors makes it fairly efficient, almost like a probe. Because if you think about probe, when you use probe for free, alright, you're still going to get hit 1 off Ad Nauseam, and you're still going to take 2 damage from casting the probe if you cast it for free. So this will only hit me for 2 more damage than this and just draws me an extra card. That's actually not that bad at all, considering we do not have enough 5-drops to really kill us, and that it is a gas card and happens to have perfect synergy with the kinds of hands we draw almost every single time off of our Ad Nauseam, which we may only hit maybe 10 times. Makes it really deceivingly bad when you hit it with Ad Nauseam, because it's actually fairly good. But the only thing that's weak about this card is in the opening turns, when players are not trying to destroy your lands, it feels fairly dead. But then we come back to our Chrome Mox here, and the fact that we don't mind wheeling cards away, and things like this, and it's really not that bad. One of the good things about getting to play green in this shell, if you could play, like when I played 5-color Storm, was the land drop effects, even with really light lands like an Azusa or an Exploration, was very strong, especially with a card like Gush. Whenever I see Gush, the only thing I can think is how absurdly broken it is with Fast Bond. And the classic and vintage decks I played, like, you don't understand how stupid Gush is until you've played it with Fast Bond. Like, Gush plus Fast Bond makes this card stronger than an Ancestral Recall or a Black Lotus. But even here, where we can't do some stupid Fast Bond cheese, the card is very, very strong. The piles you can make with Doomsday that make it so efficient is because drawing 2 for free is very strong, and the most efficient way to make mana with Doomsday is LED plus Cantrip into Yawgmoth's Will. That's the most efficient pile most of the time. If you do not have Gush online, there are ways to do it with Dark Ritual and Night's Whisper that are fairly efficient. The most efficient piles will also use Probe. The problem with using Probe with Doomsday is that you always open yourself to Douche Scoop. Pretty much, if you use a pile, say you go Gush into LED Probe, and then you Probe into Yawgwill, and then Lab Man, whatever your opening cantrip was of your hand. The cost of that pile was like cost of the cantrip. So if it was a, say a Ponder or whatever. But you still need to cast the Probe both times. It's not horrible because not every single time will someone just scoop. But if I have any pile that doesn't use Probe that still works, I'll choose not to use Probe. This wouldn't be a problem like in 1v1. Probe piles are much more efficient. One of the reasons I think Doomsday is maybe more popular in 1v1 is because of Get Tax and Probe being slightly stronger, which means for just cheaper piles. But you can use Ponder, Preordained Brainstorm, anything like that, and Probe slot in almost any of those piles for just a mana or maybe 2 more, depending on if you have to cast it twice. Sometimes casting it twice doesn't even affect the pile cost, so it just depends. That was my 0 costs. Land base. We play one land that's not so great at making mana, Reliquary Tower. The main reason we play Reliquary Tower is because it has insane synergy with Necropotence, Ad Nauseam, Recurring Insight. Those are the main cards that I play this card for. And that's good enough reason because I'm going to be tutoring for one of those cards nearly every game. If not, I'm going to be tutoring for a wheel. But no matter what, I'm going to be drawing lots of cards. It's almost strongest with Necropotence. Like one of the best combos is Dark Ritual, Necropotence, Reliquary Tower, another land, fetch land. Because you can land it, as soon as Necro's down, if you have Reliquary Tower out, it's pretty much like getting to Ad Nauseam on your turn for guaranteed cost of 1. So you can literally just draw 25, 30 cards, pass, and then just win when you untap. Like guaranteed. And you're going to have access to every single one of those cards to counterspell them. It's just going to be super easy free win. If you have Ad Nauseam and say your life total has been taking a hit, someone's playing a fast deck, someone opened Soul Ring Signet and Kali of the Vast, someone played a Sarah Ascendant and they started hitting you immediately as a combo player, they recognize you use your life as a resource for whatever reason. With Reliquary Tower out, you can just draw up to 12, 13 cards, something like this, sit back, survive the turn, and then go into your win on the following turn. So that's fairly strong. There are other ways we draw lots of cards. For example, let's say we took way too much damage and we go for the Recurring Insight with our tutor instead of Ad Nauseam because we're already at like less than 20, let's say, and someone still has 6 cards in their hand. So we go for the Recurring Insight instead, and even if we whiff, we can keep our full grip. And not to mention the fact we're not going to have to bend any cards to the first Recurring Insight trigger if we've got the Reliquary Tower out. So good chance we're tapped out, but there's a good chance we also have 1 mana open for one of our control spells, or we drew a free control spell. Swamp and Urborg Tube with Yawgmoth. I wanted a basic Swamp, 1 because I just needed 1 more black source, and I could have played something else, but I'm already playing like Blood Crypt, which is already not that great. But I just needed another black source. That was the main reason I played 1 Swamp. But the other reason it was nice to be able to fetch a basic, just because Blood Moon effects are a thing. And with Dark Ritual being a card, and Blood Moon being a thing, having a single Swamp is just pretty good for that as well. Islands, 7 I consider to be pretty much a minimum. If you factor in we have 9 fetch lands that can go get some form of dual that always has island, and we have 4 dual islands and 7 islands up here. We are looking at a total of, let's see here, 9 plus 4 is 13, 7, 20. That's what I thought. 20 islands. So roughly 1/5 of the deck is islands, which is very, very important for our high tide. Not to mention the fact that our deck has, I think, 40, 45 blue symbols, maybe 25 black symbols, and 5 red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So not much red at all needed. Lots of blue needed. It is a little skewed because there are a lot of good double black cost cards we're able to cast early. Triple black cost cards that we'd like to cast, which typically leads us to us tutoring this card as the easiest line to get some of these cards out efficiently when we happen to draw them. Which is what I'm talking about, not grabbing ad nauseam with your tutor. When you get certain cards, it's just simply easier sometimes to grab something like Dark Ritual and power out one of these cards. And it's just better. But 20 islands is about what I want. 3 every color land. This helps me get my red splash guaranteed while not giving up blue or black. It's okay to have a couple of these cards because usually, even if you're casting a high tide, whatever mana source you use, if you don't have your Talisman of Dominance or whatever out to cast it, you can just open with one of these. Sunken Ruins is very strong because I'm mostly double blue and double black, and by that I mean I have no double red and lots of double black and double blue that I could want to switch into. Mostly for filtering to double black because I have more blue and I'm going to fetch more blue for my high tide. But an island plus this is very strong, just 2 lands to have in your opening hand, which is another reason it's just very good. Blood Crypt is kind of a shitty land, but we needed, I wanted another red source just to make sure that I could get off my red splash when I needed. I need another black source. I could play some sort of 3-color land here, but I decided just in case for whatever reason I exile or Badlands or bin one early, I could still fetch the Blood Crypt if I needed black-red for whatever reason. So, Steam Vents Volcanic Isle, red splash off of my fetches once again, even though we only need 1. Good to play both for the same reason as stated before, plus they're both blue, so they count as islands, so almost strictly better. Steam Vents, well, I mean you take damage, so I guess it's a toss-up between Steam Vents and Basic Island, but Steam Vents is definitely better, I think, just so we can get our splash off here. Watergrave and Underground Sea are like the best 2 lands in the deck. We will be fetching them like every game. We don't even mind taking extra damage. You can tap for black and then get a blue with a high tide up, so we'll typically want both of these in play almost every game. And then the fetch lines to find them. And the fetch lines are the strongest cards because they let you do good things with your cantrips and your ways of manipulating your top deck and so on and so forth. Okay, we finally got to 1-drops. That take way longer than I thought it would, but I think that's okay. Pyroblast, Swan Song, Chain of Vapor, Duress, Thoughtseize. 5 control cards in the 1 slot here. Pyroblast I really like because most of the things that shut us down are blue. We want to have a control card that can cover our wheels and our ad nauseam and our win conditions and things like that, and we want them to be cheap. At 1, Pyroblast is fairly cheap. It does the job of protecting all of our things from counter spells. It also protects us from any form of bounce from blue. You can destroy someone's Cyclonic Rift for massive value off a single red. It's also really nice that it can kill blue permanents. For example, let's say you tap out on turn 1 or 2 and you're playing against Edric Spymaster of Trest and he opens Mana Dork. He slams his Edric on the field instead of playing more value behind it. If you want, you can just blast that SOB right off the field, or let's say it's even a better situation. He's harder and he plays, multiple dudes, and he goes into his Edric. He swings, you know, he gets a couple cards that's starting to look bad, and then you top deck a Pyroblast. Now you can still kill the Edric if you want to. Be better to top deck a Grape Shot possibly if you have a decent hand. But the other thing that's really nice about it is if he had a counter spell, you can use it to bait his counter magic out by targeting the Edric preemptively. There are a lot of interesting things you can do because you can target spells, permanents with it, I mean, however. There are actually quite a few strong blue permanents that we very much don't like. Let's say you have a fetch land in your hand, and you're tapped out, and you're holding a Pyroblast, and Azami plays back to basics. Pyroblast is insanely good here because now we go fetch our Volcanic Island, we kill the back to basics, we can even do this end of turn. If Azami is tapped out, we're going to do it right now. You know, very, very versatile. I could play the REB as well, but I don't like that it's red because now I have to fetch a off-color land or have a red source to play it. So I don't actually like that it's red, doesn't pitch a Force of Will, I like things that are blue. Blue things I can pretty much always play. The other reason is we only have so many slots for control, and I consider some of these a little bit better. Swan Song gives me a little bit of diversity. I should pull this card to the front. I'll let you see that card. And you play the Pyroblast, or Pyroblast and REB are slightly different, and this is a little bit better because you can target things without them being blue, which is fairly relevant, but sometimes is relevant, so I think this one is slightly better. Swan Song. Swan Song fights with a lot of different spells for its slot, but I consider it to be the best one. You can play Spell Pierce in this slot, you could play Dispel in this slot, you could play, what's the one I'm thinking of with Storm? Flusterstorm in this slot. All very strong cards, but I think Swan Song for me gets the nod. I don't even play Vandal Blast in this deck. Vandal Blast is a very strong card. Artifacts are some of the strongest cards in the format, and being able to blow them up is very strong. I've played it in and out of the deck. It just kind of depends what you're playing against. It feels very strong on Magic Online because the decks tend to be not quite as strong as mine, and if they open something like a Soul Ring, it's about the only time they have a chance. So getting a Vandal Blast and blowing it up is usually very, very strong. But if I could play Nature's Claim, I would 100% play it. Killing artifacts in a grouping of decks that are all as fast and as powerful as mine is okay, you know. Like you kill one guy's Soul Ring, the other guy plays Mana Dork, and the other guy plays, you know, Mox Diamond Thing, you know, Mox Diamond Sylvan Library. Like, being able to kill one of the Mana Rocks is okay, but I would rather just play my own mana spell or my own cantrip and try to get my own stuff going in those first couple turns. Like most players would, due to the multiplayer nature of the format. And because of those things, I don't really want to be doing something like that. But the reason I would still play a Nature's Claim is because enchantments, like I mentioned before, the Back to Basics, the Blood Moon effects, there's so many hate cards that are just a pain in the ass from enchantment. Like, there are just an insane number of enchantments I really, really don't like. And being able to counter those is very, very important. Though Swan Song is mainly just the counter spell that hits other counter spells, the fact that it can also pick up that random player's Armageddon that you really didn't want to happen right now is very good. The fact that if someone tries to mind twist your hand away because they think you're about to go off, you can say no, you know, earlier in the game. If someone is playing Prosh and they try to drop Food Chain, you can still hit it. You know, if someone is playing Mind Over Matter combo with their Arcanist deck, and you know you have one blue open, and they try to drop their Mind Over Matter, an instant win before you were ready. You know, it's just so many cards other than the counters that you were trying to initially really play this card for. 2/2 is really irrelevant. I guess one could argue if you're playing against people you don't know, it would make them slightly less angry that you counter their spell. I don't know. I guess it's never really good to give someone a 2/2, especially when every little bit of life we have matters, and this gives them the potential to deal damage. But I think it's massively outweighed by its benefits. We're also playing Chain of Vapor. I consider it a staple in Storm decks. The ability for you to build Storm off bouncing your own cards is incredible. The fact that it costs a single blue and an instant speed can remove almost any of those cards I just told you I hated that I wanted to run Nature's Claim for. But in addition, bounce generals and stuff like that is insane. The fact that we have fairly few high-impact permanent cards early in the game makes it very unlikely that the player we cast this on is willing to sacrifice the land just to bounce one of our permanents, if we even have one. So, not to mention, if we're going to wheel or something like that and someone has the Soul Ring or anything we don't want, we can always end of turn Chain of Vapor it back to their hand before we wheel, and bye-bye, it's gone. So very strong in that right. Good after the Ad Nauseam because of the bounce factor. You could simply bounce one card for 2 Storm. You can do some really interesting, wacky stuff when you bounce top in response to drawing it, especially with Doomsday. There's some really funny piles you can do with that. It's just a very, very strong card. And going back to that Vandal Blast I took out, I considered, since I wanted a hosing artifact card, that 9 times out of 10 it would be a single deck that plays too many artifacts. So let's say a deck that wants to run Mishra's Workshop, colorless deck, Sharam deck, something like that. I think Hercules Recall would be very strong against that. I think it's the next card I want to test in the shell. Because it has that use to be able to bounce your own stuff back and save it, to be able to bounce your own stuff back and cast it all again for additional Storm and mana like a ritual. I think Hercules Recall is a very strong card. I mean, I've been using it in a Faro, one of my more fair decks, and almost any play group I play against, any power level, the Hercules Recall seems to be very powerful. Artifacts are very strong in this format, and being able to control them is very good. There's a reason it is a vintage staple, and I'm glad I got my like $2 because I guess now that people are playing vintage, they're like $50 on MTGO or something ridiculous like that. But since I already have one, I don't really care. Yeah. But Chain of Vapor I consider slightly better because of its ability to take care of problems. Just very strong. Duress and Thoughtseize, I'm going to run over more blue counters at 1, or Pyroblast or something of that nature, and you might ask why. First of all, information is invaluable in this deck. If I take a Thoughtseize or Duress on somebody, and I see lots of counter magic, then it's like, okay, I have to wait till they're tapped out to do anything. You could argue maybe that if you had the converted mana cost 1 counter spell, that you'd only need to fight through 1, but decks like that typically go land and then go. So I'd much rather just see their hand and then strip their best card. Not to mention, if you hit somebody who doesn't have what you thought, let's say you aim this at the blue player before your combo turn, and you just see they have a very strong card or a hate permanent that you don't want. Say someone played something that totally screws you and you're not ready to go off yet. Maybe something that hoses your tutors. Let's say someone taps out to Aven Mind Sensor and kills your Crackland. Okay? Chain of Vapor, Aven Mind Sensor, Thoughtseize it out of your hand. Bye-bye. Little tiny mini synergies like that have been around for forever. I still remember one of the first decks I